All right. What's up, everybody? How we doing? Happy Monday, September 16th. Here we are, YouTube Live. How's everyone doing, you guys? If you're tuning into this live, let me know where you're coming in from. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Are you tuning in from somewhere in the US, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Australia? Let me know where you guys are tuning in from. I would love to hear from you guys and know who I'm speaking to. So if you guys are watching this live, let me know where you're tuning in from. If you guys haven't already subscribed to my channel, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. Give this video a like, comment under this video, engage in the chat section. Any questions you guys have? Today, we're going to be talking about how do you attract a divine masculine man? How do you call in the divine magic man? Which is obviously something I've talked about before, but it's a topic that you can't talk about enough. And it's the magic question is, how does a woman, how does this, and I think furthermore, you guys, how does a spiritual woman, how does a woman who she's got crystals in her pocket, she's pulling tarot cards, she wants to walk the spiritual path, how does she call in a spiritual man who's also really just in his masculine as well, in all the ways that, her yoni loves? How do you call in this divine masculine, this man of God? How do you call in this energy into your life? And so that's what we're going to be kind of jamming on today. So just if you are watching this live, I would just love for you guys to post any of your questions in the comment sections, any ways that you are struggling as a woman to call in this divine masculine man into your life. And since this is a topic that I've talked about before, I was thinking of a little smoke there. There we go, smoky. Kind of entering this point from a specific sort of avenue for today's live to kind of jump into this topic from a specific sort of area. So how does a woman attract a divine masculine man? Well, I think first off, we need to let's identify what the divine masculine is. You know what I mean? And I'm curious, just if you're watching this live or you're watching this in the comments, maybe you can throw in where you struggle to discern what the divine masculine is. Maybe what you think the divine masculine is. I'm just sort of curious what everyone sort of attributes the divine masculine to be, right? So you kind of think the divine masculine and the divine feminine, they're very much like reciprocals of each other, right? And this is my experience, is that so much of what you see online on social media, people throw around the term divine feminine, divine masculine all the time, in situations where it probably isn't completely accurate. I wouldn't say it's complete bullshit what they're saying, but it's not the complete embodiment of the word. And so the divine masculine, a man of God, is so to step into your divine masculine and divine feminine means that you're not simply working in this lifetime. Okay. So if we want to think of how do I attract a divine masculine man in my life, to think about what is a man who stepped into his divinity. What he's actually had to do is he's had to course correct the polarity dynamics within his lineage at an ancestral level, right? And he's actually had to course correct that karma in his body. So the term I use is ancestral polarity, but so he's had to work to literally find a level of masculinity in his life that is beyond this lifetime. So when a guy's in his divine masculine, it means that he's accessing masculine power and masculine potential that is beyond simply this lifetime. And so people love to throw around divine masculine, divine feminine, but we're not really accessing the divine feminine or divine masculine until we find our femininity or our masculinity on the other side of our ancestors, right? So we need to have actually worked with a lot of ancestral energy to be able to move the ancestral energy through our body to then find our divinity. Our divinity is literally the expression of ourself that we find without the influence, contraction, or imprint of our ancestors in our body or our energetic field, right? That's why, divine masculine, masculinity, right? Traditional men's work is masculinity, but it's not divine masculine. And it's very, very necessary for so many people, right? Because not everyone's going to appeal to sort of this divinity, this sort of spiritual, this magic masculine. Not every woman's going to want that. Not every man is going to step into that or even want to step into that, right? So traditional sort of men's work is very much working with your masculinity in this lifetime. It's very much having a support group and very much more of this traditional masculine who's going to appeal to Joe Schmo in Wisconsin, who he won't even, being in your divine masculine's not even on your radar. And he probably, if he even knew what it was, he's like, I don't want that. I don't want that type of life. So it's very much a different sort of masculine energy. So very traditional masculinity is usually associated with men's work, right? Divine masculine's a very, very different paradigm, right? I think so often we are like, divine masculine is just a man stepping into his masculine. There's so many more layers to it. It's very much the divine masculine is a man who has moved into a spiritual warrior. He has become a spiritual warrior through a very sort of specific initiation that he's had to undergo. And so typically, when it comes to traditional masculinity, it's just about building your masculine energy. I'm going to go do a men's work, a men's class. I'm going to be more consistent. I'm going to be more cognizant of my word. I'm going to move into greater integrity. Whereas the divine masculine usually has this very anointed sort of mission that he doesn't plan for, that results in him descending through his feminine first to then birth like a holy masculine energy that he essentially had to create through this massive descent that he had to go through, right? And so the divine masculine is very much this godly anointed mission, right, that he has to go through to kind of restore this potent sort of holy masculinity in his life, right? And so it's a very, very different process. Divine masculine is masculinity you find on the other side of your ancestors. Masculine energy is something you find just sort of working with your own traumas of this lifetime, working with your own codependent patterns. And the divine masculine very much does both. The divine masculine is working in this lifetime and other lifetimes, right? So the divine masculine is working with their codependent patterns, their inner child, all the sort of pieces that they haven't been able to move into their own masculinity because of their lifetime. But the divine masculine is accessing an energetic space that is beyond this lifetime. They're working with, why in their whole paternal lineage have the men not been able to be in their power? Why have the women in the maternal lineage not been able to trust masculine men throughout the entire lineage? We're dealing in a greater sort of fabric of energy, right? We're dealing with a greater fabric of energy. And so very much the divine masculine is a guy who's very much in his masculine in the way of a traditional masculine, but he's also moved beyond to layers of the ancestors, right? So that's the big, big difference. And so, a divine masculine man is very spiritual, but he's also very of the earth, right? So he has all those traditional qualities of, he is able to take the lead. He's able to make decisions. He's, very consistent. He's able to follow through on the power of his word. He's disciplined. He's, all these pieces, right? But then he's also had to cultivate a greater sort of access to this energetic masculine that has moved into sort of this ancient sort of energetic space where he's cleared all the energy of his ancestors as well. So the divine masculine is the guy who comes in and he clears his entire energetic field, mother wound, father wound, and he creates this resurrection and course correction between the maternal and the paternal ancestors in his body, right? So when we move into the divine masculine, it means that we're creating an unprecedented masculine energy for our lineage. There's never been a masculine energy that has moved at this volume and frequency, right? And so, okay, we're a woman. How do we even move into the orbit of this? How do we even move into the orbit of this? So if you want to be able to attract a man who's very much in his masculine, but is also has cleared energy of this ancient sort of space, there's one really, really specific thing that these men are looking for. And it's that the woman the feminine, has really cultivated a ferocious relationship with spirit, source, and God. This is the number one thing that he's looking for. And okay, so he's looking for, how has she cultivated a relationship with source, spirit, and God? And so what that means is that there's going to be a lot of space. There's going to be a lot of space in her energetic field, in her system. Because when a woman really cultivates a strong relationship with source, spirit, and God, it's the same thing as her cultivating a relationship to the divine masculine. So when a woman really, really creates this trust, surrender to a higher power, to source, to God, at such a deep level in her body, she is engaging in the process of what would it be like to then surrender to a man who is of the divine masculine. So the important thing to note here is that when you think of the divine masculine, like if you're a woman and you think about surrendering and submitting to God, to the greater universe, what sort of qualities or what sort of energy do you feel? Right? Maybe you feel this really powerful energy. Maybe you feel this really penetrative energy. Maybe you feel this really gentle, loving energy. Maybe you feel this force that if you don't act with your own integrity, that you're going to be moved off course. That if you don't honor your truth, then things are going to get difficult. So if you as a woman, imagine if you're engaging with the universe, right? And what is that relationship like? And you think about, if you're engaging with a very deep relationship with the universe and God, like what human qualities could you pull from the universe? If you were to imagine the universe as the masculine, what sort of qualities would you pull from? And as a woman, when you really learn to engage with God and the universe, you're really beginning to build an imprint, a prototype, an archetype of what this manifested three-dimensional divine masculine man will feel like, right? Obviously, he's going to be a human. It's still going to be different. But as a woman, that is your greatest access point to beginning to discern of what his energy might feel like, right? What would the divine masculine energy feel like? And so if you're a woman and you're beginning to surrender to God and source, the energy is probably going to be really, it's going to be strong. It's going to be powerful. It's going to be really clean, pure, and holy, right? Really clean, pure, and holy. If you think about as a woman surrendering to God, the universe, as if it were masculine energy, it's going to be probably like the cleanest masculine energy you've ever experienced. Like, whoa, like it almost feels religious. It feels like the most pure crystal form of masculine energy that you've ever experienced, right? So that's a bit of what the divine masculine is going to feel like. His masculine energy is going to feel really pure and clean. Like he's not disconnected. He's not compartmentalized. He's very fluid and very in alignment of the totality of his vessel and who he is. There's a lot of truth. There's a lot of authenticity. And also, right, if you're a woman and you're surrendering to God and the universe, it's very much like if you don't honor your oracle and you don't honor what your truth is, that's probably where the universe is going to kind of intervene and make your life more challenging, right? So you think about, if you're in relationship with a divine masculine man, he's going to be able to feel into everything. He's going to be able to feel into your closure. He's going to be able to feel into where you're protected, where you're not expressed, where you're not liberated. And it's going to feel challenging in the sense that you won't be able to get away with anything in this man's energy. The same way that you won't be able to get away with anything in your relationship to God and the universe, that you're going to have to be in the most pure, authentic alignment of who you are and how you engage with the energy of who you are in relationship to God and the universe. The same thing when you're in relationship with a divine masculine man, because he's going to see everything. He's going to feel everything in a way you probably never really experienced with masculine energy, right? So it's going to feel a little bit challenging. It's going to feel like this really, really firm but loving energy in your space, right? So I think what's important to note here is, so often, and this is a question to kind of bring forward to you, say you get out of a relationship, right, as a woman. Are you immediately looking to get into another relationship? Or are you immediately moving into distractions? Are you immediately on the dating apps? Are you immediately dating? Are you immediately trying to fill space? So the question, you know, that's bringing forward to women is, if you want to be able to move onto the vibrational plane of the divine masculine, what do you do with space in your life? Because what a woman does with space is going to tell you everything you need to know about her readiness to call in a divine masculine man into her space, because that is the number one thing that a divine masculine man is looking for. How does she operate with space? How much space is there in her field, right? And so, say like you just out of a relationship, you're immediately dating, or you're like, hammering down on that to-do list, or you're trying to fill that void with linear creation. I'm going to create shit. I got to create shit. I got to produce. I got to produce. And you move back into this default of control, right? So, for example, if a man doesn't feel any space, what he probably feels is that your system moves into a default of needing to control things. That you need to occupy whenever there's space. You don't trust that space. You aren't comfortable with it. You can't hold it in your body, and so you need to come. And the default is to control or occupy space. When a man feels that, he's like, "There's no room for me to be my masculine here." Because you know that she's going to move into a default of needing to control, of needing to occupy space. And because a man wants to be able to feel space, and he wants to be able to come in and occupy that space. He wants to be able to fill that space because it's what lights him up. It's what ignites and activates his masculine spirit. It allows him to feel powerful, right? And so, how do you respond to space, ladies? When there's space in your life, and the good example is, the really good example is when you're not in a relationship. What do you do with open space? Because when you're not in a relationship, what's going to happen is that relationship to space is really, really going to be revealed. It's really, really going to be revealed. And so women need to be able to learn to really open their bodies into empty space, to really be able to liberate and feel themselves in that space without needing to fill so many things, without needing to your to-do list, constantly building shit in business, constantly dating, constantly having things to come in and distract, because that's the number one thing that he's discerning is, how does she move in space, right? How much space is there in her body and energetic orbit? And so a lot of women who haven't really healed their relationship to the masculine in a big sense, their bodies can't hold space. Their bodies can't hold space. And so they move into a default of occupying space or needing to control, right? There's nothing more that men who have a masculine essence can't stand, that when they're around a woman whose default is to control things. Her default is to move into the masculine pole. And what's happening is, she's saying that I don't trust his masculine energy. What she's saying is, I don't trust men in general. I don't trust masculine energy in general. But she's also saying, I don't trust God and the universe, right? So as a woman, what a man's discerning and looking for is, what's her level of trust and surrender in the open space? How can she surrender to something greater in the open space? So maybe as a woman, you're saying, well, like, I'm a single mom, or I have kids, and I have to, hammer down on control, and I have to be in charge. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is an unfolding to something greater, that you trust the unfolding of something greater in your life, and your body is literally interchanging very potently, very vibrantly with a greater creation energy. And that's God, that's source. And that means that you're going to be able to be in your body, be in your sovereignty in that space. And you're going to be able to allow your body, your heart, every single part of yourself to open into that space, right? And so how does a woman, when she's not in a relationship, what does she do with that space, right? Does she move into the default of like having to produce? There's a lot of women who say they come from very kind of that boss babe imprint when, they're not in a relationship. They move back into like hyper creation or hyper productivity, and they're just producing, or they're just immediately trying to find a dude. They're trying to find a man, or they're constantly dating. And so in order to move onto the vibrational plane of the divine masculine, as a woman, you have to be able to really be able to feel into your own energy for a while, right? Because if you think about a divine masculine man has really had to meet his masculine essence on his own island, right? So one thing that a man has had to do is that he's really had to move into, how do I move into my masculine mission, my purpose, what I'm here to do and create, all in my own energy. He's really had to meet that, right? And so the divine masculine, right, has had to look at other ways that he distracts from his mission, his purpose, whether that's with him dating, with him being in relationships, using women to distract him, to sabotage him from his purpose, whether that's from, all these different ways that he would abandon and sabotage sort of this God truth of what he's here to do and create. And so as a woman, to be able to attract a man who's aligned himself with this divine masculine mission, the response is you also have to similarly been able to walk with God for a while, been able to walk with the divine, which means you've had to open every single part of yourself in open space, right? Without having to run to fill the space with your to-do list, with being so crazy busy that there's no time for you to kind of be in your own energy, with immediately going and dating again. And you see this all the time with women that get out of a relationship and like 2-3 months later, they're on dating apps and they're dating. I'm like, that's not sufficient time to learn the lessons that you had to learn from that relationship to really integrate and feel into your own energy with source and God, right? So we need a sufficient amount of time to feel into our own energy, to build this prototype with source and God. So the way that a woman heals her hyper need for control is she has to be able to surrender to God and the universe as if it were masculine energy, right? And so the divine masculine can feel a woman who has not created that trust in her body. She has not created that trust in her life. He feels her needing to move into a default of control. He feels her needing to move into a default by scarcity. He feels her needing to move into a default of fear. He can feel this in her body and system. And what it really means is kind of like this bracing and this holding on in her nervous system, or this sort of abrasiveness or sharpness that she hasn't been able to soften in open space, in her life, in her relationship to God and source. And so when it comes to a man who's really sort of cultivated this godly divine mission, and he's really pouring into that mission. He's really, really pouring into that mission. And what he's had to do similarly is look at everywhere he tries to sabotage out of fear, everywhere that his little boy or a sense of unworthiness, every piece he's had to come up against that has abandoned him from not being able to feel the world all on his own, to feel his masculine energy interchanging with the world all on his own, right? Because when we think about sacred union, you guys, sacred union is not oneness, it's sovereignty. It's personal, energetic sovereignty, right? Where the relationship becomes an act of amplification, not completion, right? And so we have to really look at the way that we're relationally pulling from, right? So a lot of sacred union is that we've really killed all the fantasy. We've killed all the fantasy around relationships to really move into a sobering truth within ourselves. What have we avoided having to cultivate internally inside of ourselves, and we've extorted as a relationship to try to alleviate or to heal in some way where we're really pulling from that lack and we're looking for that relationship to save us or absolve us from those peace. And so a lot of the time in like spiritual communities, we have this very idealistic sort of, we merge as one sort of perfect relationship, this very sort of, karmic sort of twin flame type relationship. And it's very much like when you hear these stories, someone's like, I was in a relationship, I was married for 20 years. And then 2 months later, like I was manifesting my person. Like that's not sovereignty, because you didn't take the time to really feel into your own energy, to really feel and integrate your own sort of energy with God and source, and to really, really feel an open space. Because when you're really able to feel into open space without needing to move into a default of control in your life, you're really beginning to heal every single part of yourself that you would outsource or extort to a relationship. But you're really beginning to feel into your own power. You're really, really beginning to feel into your own power, which now you're creating a prototype, So we have to be able to kill that fantasy, right? To move into sacred union, the fantasy of relationships has to die, which means we actually have to heal the inner love addict, the part of us that is looking to move into this spiritual divinity in relationship. That actually has to die. And most people don't actually, in the spiritual space, get to that step, right? And so what they're actually creating is not this true imprint of sacred union or this true imprint of the divine masculine or the divine feminine. It's actually kind of like a spiritual wounded sort of imprint of relationship, where I kind of call it spiritual codependence. And what didn't happen is we didn't really feel our own energy in the world for a period of time, right? So think about, someone gets out of a relationship and you hear these stories all the time that within a month they were married to someone else already. And I'm like, that's great, but you didn't have this rupture, and then you didn't feel the world all on your own. You didn't move into how can I move into my own sovereignty? Immediately you got into something, right? And so that's why when I really think about how do you attract a divine masculine man, what he's looking for, what a man who's really healed his own inner love addict, where he's really, really looked at the ways that relationship served as fantasy, where he was looking for this spiritual divinity within relationship. It's really how he has felt into his own energy in the world. And he has moved into his mission, and he has really been able to feel himself interchanging with the world, opening the world with his mission, opening the world with this unleashed, unhinged power, opening the world with his spiritual God-given gifts and exactly what he's here to do. That he has really felt into that energy all on his own. And then as a woman, you're really able to feel into the space and open up to God completely on your own. And so the question is, for women, what do you do with open space? And particularly, what do you do with open space when you're not in a relationship? Because what we're talking about, how do you attract this divine masculine man so we're not in a relationship, right? And so it's really, really about you being able to feel inherently taken care of, you being able to feel inherently surrendered and submitted to something greater when you don't have that masculine energy in your life. And you build an imprint by how you interchange with God and source. Because when, as a woman, you open up to God, you're actually pulling qualities and traits that are going to be manifested in your dude, right? Which is, it's probably a very loving, a very gentle, but also a very firm, a very ferocious, a very fierce, a very pure, and a very, very clean energy. And so as a woman, if you've never felt into that space and really cultivated that relationship, you don't actually have an imprint in your body. you don't actually have an imprint in your body. So what happens is most women are pulling from some contraction or compression on the right side of their body with an unhealed relationship to the father or the paternal ancestors, which means they're not really going to be able to fully feel into that relationship of God or source. They're not really going to allow themselves to. So when we have like a right side compression in our body as a woman, then we're not going to be able to fully open to God or source. And so, what's actually going to heal that right side compression as a woman is by fully opening your body, every single part of your energy centers to God and source, and to build an imprint and a prototype of that energy in your body. But most women don't ever get to that point. Too much fear comes up. What if I don't meet someone? I'm getting older. And so we automatically, when a little bit of space opens, we try to fill the space. We try to fill it. You know, as a woman, maybe it's, you know, you move back into, I'm going to go so hard in my business and I'm just going to produce. I'm just going to fill all the open space by constantly working, constantly doing. I'm going to search for a man immediately. I'm never actually going to like allow myself a break from dating. This is why like I'm really like a huge advocate of like, you know, we need to have a long period of time after we get out of a relationship to feel the world all on our own without feeling it with dating, to reestablish and reaffirm what we integrate from that relationship in our body, and to be able to reaffirm what that new prototype is with God and source. Right. But most often people are out of a relationship and within 2 months, they're like already dating. And there's no way you've been able to open to space in your life if you've given yourself 2 months after a relationship, even 3 months after a relationship. You need to really actually feel that fear that comes in space. The same thing a divine masculine man has to do, because a divine masculine man, without having to have his worth validated by women, he's having to feel, what is my value as a man? What can I create in an open space where all I can feel is my own energy? He's having to literally meet his own value and worth in open space, and how he's able to trust his capacity to execute and carry out his mission, right? And so he's having to move into that experience, right? He's having to move into that experience. And so the reciprocal of that is, how does a woman move in open space, right? And so the divine masculine is going to be able to feel where your expression is really contracted. He's going to be able to feel where your closure is. He's going to be able to feel where there's a lot of fear in your nervous system. He's going to be able to feel where you move into defaults of control, where you're trying to control something, right? And so, for example, for me, one of the things that's most unattractive is when you feel a woman can't be in space. She can't be in open space. She has to constantly fill that space. And what I know is that there won't be a lot of room for me to be in my masculine, because a guy really feels space in his system when he moves into like the field of a woman. It's like, there's a lot of room here. She's cultivated a lot of internal space. She's cultivated a lot of internal space, which means she's had to have all her shit come up in relationship to God and source. She's really had to have all her shit come up. And what also comes up in that space is that as a woman, she has to also meet what's her relationship to her own internal masculine, right? Some women are, you know, maybe they're in their feminine, but they have never really cultivated a strong inner masculine. So they're looking to be saved by a man. Maybe they haven't been able to make a level of their own sort of income. And so they're looking for a man to come in and sort of pay for shit. And so he's also discerning, right, that she's able to, you know, be in a healthy integration of her own masculine energy, but that she has created space for her feminine, that she has cultivated her own space for her feminine without a man, right? She's cultivated her own space for her feminine without a man. So if you guys are just tuning in, we're talking about how does a woman attract a divine masculine. The number one thing we're talking about here is space. How does a woman respond to space, right? And so, like, I can feel it in a woman's system when she's got a control. When she's got a control, it's like, you know, the whole thing, like you go out for dinner, um, and a woman's just impulse is to kind of step up there and say, "Oh yeah, we have a table for," rather than like, "I'm just gonna stay back here. I'm not even gonna go up there," right? But some women, their impulse is to you know, maybe their whole life that they've always had to take care of themselves, right? Which is fine. I understand that we all have these stories, but still, unless you heal that and work with that, you're not going to draw in a divine masculine man. If your impulse is to still move into control in space, that divine man is not going to show up. He's not even going to be in your paradigm and field because he's going to feel into that energy, right? And you know, I would say the most common things that it looks like for a woman is either she is constantly doing shit and she's filling the space with work, hyper productivity, or she's just incessantly dating, right? She's constantly trying to find someone. She's like trying to find a dude. She's constantly like entangled with dudes. She's not really able to be in her own energy. Those are like the two most common things from a man's point of view that I notice with women when it comes to space, that we're either we make ourselves so busy and we can't sit still, we can't rest, we can't kind of be in our own energy, or we're just incessantly dating. And as soon as there's any space, we fill it with one of those, right? Rather than like, how do I really just open up internal space and am able to then submit control to something greater, which is God, source, the divine, all those things, because that's how a woman moves into her divine feminine, right? That she's able to surrender and submit to God and source when there's open space. And she trusts, she has this level of abundance in her body that she's taken care of, right? And she doesn't need a man to come in and provide for her because she's been able to provide for herself. But obviously now being able to create this dynamic where she could surrender and submit to like a physical man becomes this greater source of discernment, and obviously this greater yearning. The yes, of course, I want to be able to be taken care of by a man in some ways at some points, right? I want to move into this greater sort of spiritual actualization with inside of myself. So the prerequisite for sacred union is sovereignty. And then the act of the union becomes a greater source of submission to God and source, right? But most people like say I'm in sacred union before they've moved into a level of sovereignty with themselves. And I see it all the time because the dynamics that people are talking about are very wounded. They're very, we became one. It's very this spiritual woundedness. And you see it a lot in the spiritual community. You see people, I was married for 20 years and then I met my person a month later. Well, it's like, that's pretty fucking wounded. You know, you didn't have any time where you were all on your own, where you opened up to God and you had to feel open space and you had to be in your own sovereignty and your own power. And you built that imprint in your body and you found another sovereign being. Sacred union is about two sovereign individuals who come together for a greater mission or purpose, right? Come together for a greater mission or purpose. It's two people who are very in the own poetry of their own internal masculine, feminine energy. They've really been able to feel their own energy all by themselves without filling the space, Because in order to move into sacred union, you guys, we have to kill all hope, all relationship fantasy, all that hope has to die, right? And that's why it's like when I hear people talk about sacred union, it's like I don't think a lot of these imprints that people are talking about, they had to experience that full death of hope in their body, the full death of that inner fantasy or that inner love addict or the parts of us that look for a relationship to bring us to some promised land, right? That bring us to some promised land. And so as a woman, a guy is looking for the prototype that you have built with God and source in your body. That's the number one thing he's looking for, right? So a guy is looking for what is the level and relationship that she has built with God and source in her body. And what it really means is how do you move in open space? How do you work with open space in your life? What is your relationship to space? So the oracle in the feminine is cultivated in space. If she never allows herself to be in any space, she's not going to cultivate her feminine energy. She's not going to cultivate a trust with God and source. She's going to constantly be trying to fill the space, hyper productivity, looking for more relational fantasy. And if she's never felt in space, it means that she's never really integrated and she's never really learned the lessons from previous relationships, right? Same thing with a guy. That's why we keep getting into the same types of relationships over and over. These fantasy escapes because we've never really allowed ourselves to feel our own energy. And so the prerequisite for sacred union is really being able to feel in your own energy completely in the world and realigning your attachment system to God, where you don't have that relationship that you attach to, right? So what happens is people get out of a relationship and then they look for another thing to co-regulate, to attach their system to. And then God can't really break free, right? So we need a period of time to realign our system to source in God, to really feel our own power in our body, to how do we move through space. So as a woman, you can build that prototype and archetype of what would the divine masculine man feel. And so if a woman's never really surrendered in open space, she's never built an imprint for what the divine masculine man will feel. This is where women will choose men who aren't spiritual. You know, if you're a spiritual woman, you have to be with a spiritual man. You have to. And if you're a spiritual woman and you're not with a spiritual man, it either means you're actually not spiritual or you're not embodied in your spirituality. So if you're a spiritual woman, you have to be in relationship with a spiritual man, or else you'll never be satisfied. I mean, you could be in relationship, but you're not going to be as lit up and capable and enlivened as you're able to be. And so if you're a spiritual woman and you're not in a relationship with a spiritual man, it's either because you're not actually spiritual. Maybe you're like Instagram spiritual and you love to pull crystals and stuff, but you're not actually living a spiritual life, or it's not integrated and embodied. And it's very like disconnected and not embodied, right? And so as a woman, your spirituality is born from how do I learn to open my body in space, in open space. And one of the number one ways that we drown that out is with we have to always be dating, or we have to always have like some connection going on. We can't just be completely in our own frequency, right? We can't be completely in our own frequency. And so chronic dating and chronic hyperproductivity and are like the two most common things where the feminine is not able to really cultivate, let go of this hyper need for control. Because why are we controlling? It's because of fear, right? We're controlling because we don't trust. There's something we don't trust. But when we learn to let go of control and kind of open in that space, we realize that we're going to be okay. We realize that, oh, we didn't die. We realize maybe a part of us did die. We realize that, oh shit, there's something, there's a deeper transmission that can come through in this space. And that's where you really begin to move into more all-knowing in your body and system. As a woman, this is where you move into more all-knowing. You begin to trust yourself at a deeper level, and you trust the relationship that you've really created with God. And now what happens is you can be more discerning with masculine energy. Ooh, like what does this masculine energy feel like? Because when you open in open space and you don't move into a hyper need to control and fill the space, now you're building an imprint, a kind of discernment package of what will this guy feel like? How will I know him in the presence of this energy? And you do that by allowing yourself to feel the energy of source and God in your body, in your life. And you have to do that and cultivate that relationship for just a period of time and really create a strong sovereign relationship and a sovereign sort of code because that's when a woman's divine feminine code comes, right? It's got to come in open space in communication with source and God. But most women don't really allow themselves that time. They don't really ever go there. And so they never really fully inhabit the code that they're capable of, which means they're never actualizing on their potential of their oracle, which means they're going to choose a man that is probably not going to be able to activate the entirety of her, that she won't have the entirety of her able to be seen because she didn't cultivate the full spectrum of her capacity to see herself by how she interchanged with God and source in that space. So the number one thing the divine masculine man is looking for is, how does a woman work in space? What does she do in open space? Can she trust open space? Or does she always need to move back into a space of control, right? Because basically, when a woman's relationship to space is a relationship to her feminine, right? And if she's not able to, without, like when she's single, really open into that open space, really open her body into that open space without needing a connection of a dude around, then if she's not able to do that, then she hasn't fully come into her code. She hasn't fully come into the oracle. She hasn't fully realigned her attachment system to God and source. And then he knows that that she won't be the capable muse of inspiring him on his mission more than he ever could in his own energy. So he wants to feel a feminine code that has been washed through the frequency of God and source. A divine masculine man wants to feel a feminine energy where she has downloaded a divine feminine code. And that means she's opened her body, her entire energetic, emotional body in open space. And she's built a very thriving relationship in open space. And that means that she doesn't move into this hyper need to control. And whatever she uses to control, right? I said chronic dating and hyper productivity are probably the two most common ways that women move into control, right? That they need to constantly be doing something, they need to constantly be building, constantly be producing, over functioning, or that they're just going to be constantly looking for a connection, or they're going to be constantly entangled with some sort of connection, and they can't just completely just feel their own energy completely on their own. And if she hasn't been able to do that, she hasn't downloaded her code. Because in open space, in her own energy, that's where the code comes. And that's where she's forced to address everywhere that she's not sovereign in her own energetic field. The same thing with a guy. When he doesn't have all these feminine connections around, when he doesn't have these things that he's using to anchor his system down with anything but himself, he's forced to look at, where am I not sovereign within myself? Where am I outsourcing, externalizing? So he's forced to meet everywhere in his life that he's not sovereign. And so when two people do that and they walk with God in that relationship, that's what eventually creates the timeline of sacred union, which is a much different paradigm than twin flames, karmic spiritual relationships. It's much different. They're entirely different paradigms and realms. Like this twin flame, very spiritual wounded relationship, it's pre-divine. It's before people experience an attachment rupture and open into the space of the rupture to completely feel into their own energy with God and source, to fully download the divine masculine or divine feminine code. And so when a woman goes through that rupture and she's able to open into the space and build a new level of trust with her psychic intuition, with her body in open space, and she doesn't need to control, because she's moved into a more abundant relationship with source and God, and she trusts that she's always inherently taken care of, she doesn't feel the need to fill the space. That she trusts that God is going to take care of her. And that is the prototype for being able to build an imprint to hold divine masculine energy. To be able to not only hold divine masculine energy, but have divine masculine energy come into her space. So Robin says, I'm having addiction come up in my space as I'm working to clean and rebuild my container oriented towards God. Yes, yes. So that is exactly what happens. I guess that's another way of filling up the space. Yes, yes. So, Robin, like what's happening in that space is we're having to come face to face with our worthiness, right? So when we're just feeling our own energy in the world, for example, let's say a man is having to feel his own energy in the world and he's like, I want to build this business. And he doesn't have anything, let's say, deterring or distracting him from that. It's just him and this masculine mission in front of him. Everything that he used to sabotage or comfort a lack of worthiness is going to come up, right? Same thing for a woman when she's in that open space. Everything we use to coddle, to comfort, to massage our lack of worthiness is going to come up. That could be substances, or it could be constantly working. It could be whatever, and it's probably going to be a wide array of things, And really, what's coming up is our perceived sense of unworthiness. It's also the inner love addict, right? It's the part of us that just so badly wants to be loved, so badly wants to be chosen. When we have to feel an open space, we're having to fully feel the woundedness of that part of us, right? This is why so often people will be in a relationship for 3-4 years and then they're maybe on their own for 2 months, and then they're all of a sudden they're like in another relationship, or they're seeing someone, or they're dating that quickly, because that part of us comes up, right? In space, that part of us comes up, and we usually have defaults that we move back into, right? And so this is why a lot of spiritual community, as they talk about sacred union, they're actually talking about it from this unhealed worthiness. They're actually talking about it where we find this spiritual relationship to essentially, without having to meet the core of that unworthiness that happens in open space. And sacred union relationship is the relational paradigm that happens when we meet the terror, the fear, the discomfort, the uncomfortability of that unworthiness piece, right? And so why you said the propensity towards addictive tendencies, that totally comes up in this space, because what we're having to do is we're having to meet the core, the root. We're having to meet the deepest embryo. And this is where we see how we had used, whether it would be sex, whether it be dating, the novelty of dating, or the comfort of relationships and the attachment that comes with it. We're having to see how we used those aspects, the relational space, to essentially comfort that unworthiness, right? And so now, as we're having to meet that unworthiness head on, we're having to meet that unworthiness head on. We're having to heal what led us to move into spiritual codependence, to move into spiritual fantasy, to move into a space where the relationship in the container couldn't be godlike and it couldn't be holy. And I would say the vast majority of relationships online that claim to be sacred union are relationships that someone would have come up to this unworthiness and then would have like found another relationship before meeting this part, right? And that part is the reason why we're not sovereign. That unworthiness piece is the reason why we're not this energetically sovereign being who, as a woman, we feel that we can surrender to our own internal masculine and we feel taken care of by God and source. And as a man, this is not the piece where we can feel our own energy without needing to be validated or approved by women to feel our own worthiness with our masculine energy out in the world. That we can feel our own internal feminine and how it interchanges with our masculine and what we're here to create. So this is the process of sacred union, right? And so again, guys, if you're just tuning in or you're just watching this live, it's how does a woman attract a divine masculine? And it's very much how does she deal with open space in her life? and she has to fully be able to liberate her relationship to God in open space. And the two most common ways that women will compress the space is by dating immediately, or probably overdoing, hyper functioning, constantly doing shit, building their business, constantly producing, and they don't allow for space to open. And so that space is very much like, how do we feel our own energy without any of the masks and the ways that we try to like soothe the sense of unworthiness, and just feeling our own energy in that space. And we really have to be able to walk for a period of time in that energy, because that's actually where we become really discerning, right? That's where you become really discerning. And you're like, you really ask yourself, when you meet like another energy or someone else, you're like, is this person really going to amplify my life? Like, as a guy, you're really asking, like, is this the right energy that I'd really want to bring into my mission? And so a guy can't really be super discerning about that until he's really trusted his own capacity to build what he wants to build in the world, create what he wants to create in the world, to really be in his own energy in that way. And so he doesn't need a sense of worthiness to be consoled or comforted by a woman. And he can actually really see her. He can see this woman and be like, this is an amazing being, and I can really see her, and he's not using her in any way. And he's like, this is a very activating, amplifying energy that I would love to have in my life. It's the same thing with a woman. When she orients her relationship to God and source, she can be really discerning. Does this guy's energy feel synonymous with this energy with source and God that I've created? Does his energy feel really clean, right? Does this feel like something that could really amplify me in the space that I've already created in my life? And it forces us to have a period of time in our life where we're really, really having to face the deepest core unworthiness in our body, and we're not jumping into other relationships. We're not jumping into other relationships. We're not jumping into dating. We're not jumping into like sleeping around. We're not jumping into like having to have like a bunch of different connections we're talking to. We're just able to feel our own energy. And we're really able to move into that space. So as a woman, it's opening your body into that space and having to feel all the terror and fear, all the grief, all the anger that comes up, because everything is going to come up in that space. Everything is going to come up that hasn't allowed you to create the level of sovereignty that your spirit and your essence wants. What's going to come up is the ways in which you haven't been able to create this thriving relationship with God and source, and all the ways that you haven't been able to call in a man who's fully able to choose you and fully able to meet you. And so much of sacred union is really having a period of time where you experience a big rupture in your life and you totally feel in your own energy for a while, right? This is why, like, you see so many people in the spiritual community talk about these relationships, which, maybe it's partially sacred union, but it's not this individual sovereignty and reorientation with God between two people to move into this paradigm. And this is a very new relational imprint that I feel is coming through for people. And it's coming through for people who've had to really endure these ruptures and are really wanting to meet themselves entirely and fully move into their whole power, so they can have a relationship where they can literally call in everything, where it can be this infinite expansion relationship where they're not going to contract and concede any single part of them. And so we really need a period of time to totally feel our own energy. And as a woman, to let go of control, right? To look at, where do we move into these default patterns of trying to control when I'm feeling a lot of space, right? Because when you're feeling a lot of space, all the ways you move into these default patterns of control are ways that your divine feminine and your feminine oracle are not able to come through and be liberated. And with a man who's really moving into his divine masculine, with a man who is really healing his masculine energy at an ancestral ancient level to restore his masculinity, literally in realms of the divine and God, is looking for how does she deal with space in her body and her life. Because the number one thing he wants to feel in her energy field is that her system has moved into a space of regulation, ease, and flow in open space. And if he doesn't feel that, then he, first off, doesn't really feel that he's really going to be able to be seen. She's not going to have the capacity to see him. Her oracle is not going to liberate his mission. He's not going to trust her. He's not going to trust some aspect of her because he's going to know that when she came up to that fear, that she moved back into these patterns of control. And also he knows that he won't have the space to be the hero in her story, to really occupy his space, his kingdom in her frequency, and that she also won't be able to worship his masculine energy. She won't be able to surrender to his masculine energy and to honor his masculine energy and allow him to move into his leadership. So that's what men, the number one thing that a man is looking for, the divine masculine man is looking for. And this is how, as a feminine being, that you attract a divine masculine man. So we went through a lot here, guys. It's obviously some very high concept stuff. It's a really challenging process. You know, what we're talking about here is having to meet your deepest shit, having to meet the deepest unworthiness in your body and being able to like feel it without having to soothe it, without having to comfort it. And that's really where a woman is going to meet her true oracle, in that space, right? In that space. This is why, like, you see online social media, I'm like, most of these women are probably like part-time oracles or like half oracles, because they never really probably went all the way in that open space, and they found a dude like, you know, really quickly, or they just moved into hyper creation. They didn't really reorient the system to God. And so that's what men are looking for. The divine masculine is looking for, responding to, and that's how you move onto the paradigm and frequency of the divine masculine magic man, a guy who's recalibrating and reorienting his masculine energy in the realms of God and the divine. And this is the paradigm and the timeline where we create sacred union. So thanks so much, everybody, for listening, for watching this YouTube live Monday, September 16th. If you enjoyed what we talked about here, give this video a thumbs up. Post any questions or anything that resonated in the comment section. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel so you can be notified when new videos are dropping. I'm going to be doing these lives every Monday and Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And every Wednesday I have new videos dropping as well. So thanks so much, everyone, for tuning into this live today, as we talked about how do you attract your divine masculine, or a divine masculine. Hopefully there's some pieces here that resonated with all of you, and we'll continue on the journey. Much love, everyone, and we'll see you next time.